hate when people say age is just a number. Age is a word. What's going on, YouTube? Today we're going to talk about the state of the ESO economy. I've seen it in the comments. I've now seen it on Reddit. And I think let's break it all down. Let's talk about what the conversation is on Reddit. What is actually selling? Why there's such a deficit in the market? Is it through the guild trader changes? Is it through all the events? And spoiler alert, it's actually through a whole combination of events. We're going to break those down and also talk about how you can profit off of what's going on right now by being a little bit different than what most people are doing. And I wanted to start with this Reddit thread because I think it does a great job giving us a timeline. I don't necessarily agree with all of the conclusions that are made, but I do agree with the majority of them, and I think it's done phenomenally well. And I kind of want to highlight what pieces I think are affecting each market. This is done from the aspect of the perspective of a PC player. I'm going to try to also bridge what are some of the things and factors that are also affecting console as well. But overall, this is great. I'm not going to read for it verbatim, so we'll put it in the description below. There's still a whole lot of other things to talk about too by looking at what's currently selling on console. So we're going to take a little field trip to Mournhold and see what's actually selling, what the listings are. Let's start off with the calm before the storm. So he notes here correctly, obviously, that we've had game events, back-to-back, high rewarding events from March to April, Jester's event, and the extended special anniversary event that brings tons of new players back to the game, as well as returning players. I do think that that's generally more of a net positive than a net negative. I think more players, higher consumerization of the game. Double XP made it easier to level up ults, which is helpful. And I also think, too, that when you level up ults, too, you generally buy a whole lot of stuff for them, which is why I think that March to April, really no economic problems at all. Anniversary event boxes were crazily abundant, which is true. Although during that event, too, we had new ways to get unique rewards that were not available that year. So I think overall, this was still a really good economic time. Tons of people were getting crazy amounts of stuff. Then he's got his conclusions here, impact on economy, where he says, rightly so, that a lot of people were crashing the motif market. True. I also think that motif should be character specific. I think that would significantly stop a lot of these problems. On PC specifically, you could basically get tons of boxes very quickly on crafting characters. This is all true. He highlights the stuff that's inside of those, such as alchemy materials. Now, alchemy materials is very important for PC players because alchemy materials is basically the #1 way to convert Telvar to gold. And there's a lot of other ways that you can buy and convert a lot of your currencies through alchemy ingredients into gold. So whatever alchemy ingredients are more abundant, PC feels the effects of that pretty significantly, especially if you're somebody holding a bunch of Telvar, because now you're like, well, that was the #1 way for me to convert the majority of my Telvar to gold. It also talks about gold materials. Obviously, if everybody's farming gold materials, and you're going to notice gold materials are talked about a lot. Not just that, raw materials as well are also going to be highlighted. Everybody's farming their crafting writs, which you still should do, by the way. Great way to get gold. And because everyone's doing that at a higher rate, they're incentivized to do that. There's going to be more influx of gold materials. I would say that it could be offset by the fact that people are leveling up tons of new characters. But I think especially this year, because instead of getting a new class, we're getting a new kind of skill line. I'm just going to refer to it as a skill line. Call it whatever you want. But, you know, people are not necessarily needing to make a bunch of new characters. Whereas, you know, when we had the Arcanist, it was like, well, we got to bring this bad boy up from nothing. Versus now people, I think, are more fine-tuning their old characters. And then he talks about high-level things such as Perfect Row, Neuron Cruxes, and other high-value items were also able to be increased in how often you were able to get them. And now we've got some other aggravating factors that takes us through May of 2024. Following the Jubilee event, players that were not accustomed to doing daily crafting writs on alts were kind of more incentivized to do so. I don't know if I agree with this because I have been telling people to do daily crafting writs for years, and I can go on stream and say, guys, do this, and people will still be like, no! Crafting writs are like vegetables. People rarely ever want to eat their vegetables. But what I will say is that during the Double Explorer event, that obviously had a huge impact on the supply and demand of the materials market. He talks about the Baron Zadris motif mini event, which was also ridiculous on the market. that he says sales and zone chat guild traders saw the huge drop in price from 70 to 7, which is all true. Everyone is kind of waiting, was kind of either sniping those two to resell them at a later time. And a lot of people, too, were selling a bunch of other things to then buy a Baron Zadris mask, almost like a retirement NFT. They're like, oh, well, I'll sell it later. And then we kind of go down to the impacts on the economy from continued daily writs, double XP nodes, obviously, huge effects on the market for gold materials. And what hasn't been hit upon here that I'm going to touch upon right now is that mostly new players that are not high level, they're the ones that benefit from having easy gold methods, from just picking up nodes. So they're the ones that are most affected by not having as much money to basically purchase other things. So let's say you're brand new to ESO, you're level 10, you're like, boom, I want me some training gear, but you're broke. Obviously, you're level 10, you don't have a whole lot going for you. You're only level 10. So what you do is you pick up some materials, maybe you try to get some perfect row, maybe you try to get a potent urn crux, whatever. You got a whole lot of things that you can do, but the market for everything I just said is significantly lower, which means that the people who are selling things like training gear and things to newer players is also going to go down. How many new players are going to buy XP potions from other players if they can't even afford to get training gear? And that goes, even when they just hit 160, tons of new people are hitting 160, but because they can't easily get a bunch of gold for themselves, they're not going to be buying things from other players. So for example, I'm a huge firm believer in selling overland sets, crafted sets, etc. Well, the people who only buy those sets are the people who don't have that set. Obviously, you wouldn't buy it if you already had it, because that would be a little goofy. So from that angle, if there are not new players getting to the level and then needing to have those sets, and that can't afford it, I'm not then going to be able to make money through my favorite gold method, which means that I have to do different types of things, and it kind of trickles down that way. And that's what I wanted to hit upon here, because I think this is a big stumbling block for the economy as well. And he also kind of expands upon my point here by saying player-to-player trades don't inherently sink the cash from the economy. But he does highlight that not everybody can farm like the Baron Zadris mask. That is a very specific thing for you to be able to farm. You have to actually have Veteran Dungeon. It's a DLC one too. You might even own it if you're a brand new player. And you have to do a hard mode at least once if you're going to have a decent chance of doing it. And it can kind of redistribute wealth from people who can farm this dungeon from the people who can't. Because a lot of people too, I know tons of people who bought that mask because they plan to resell in the future. And I think that it's still going to go up in value, and that potentially could be a good option for you just because of how popular the mask is. It's one of those ones that just looks so good that it always maintains a decent value and will kind of continue to go higher up. But I think it was definitely a risk for a lot of players that are taking it. And I think a lot of people have sunk gold into that they're hoping that they can then load off in the future. And this is a really interesting point he brings up here, is that gold sellers are also suffering from what's going on. And then he kind of expands upon how if you can't buy gold with real money, then that can also create certain bottlenecks for people who sell carries and other items. I definitely think that this is true. It's certainly not an argument that I really hear a lot of people making, but I definitely think he's right. What's funny is that generally these bots and these people that sell gold, they get their money from botting raw materials. So when raw materials crash in value, essentially botting becomes not profitable to do, and it becomes very difficult for them to make money, which I just find so fascinating. And here we get to June of 2024. I think this is when people really started to go, oof, the ESO economy is becoming very lopsided. He obviously highlights Gold Road, day 42. Obviously that was pretty big. Brought a lot of players back, brought a lot of impacts to the economy. Seals of Zenthar, though, also coincided with that event, and it encouraged a lot of people to make guild trader purchases as long as the event was going on. So a lot of people were kind of buying things that they thought that they needed. They were investing in new characters that they were making for the Gold Road update, but they were investing in their current characters. That's obviously going to be pretty important because that event obviously ends and ended. Impacts on the economy. Luminous Ink was an incredible gold method. It still kind of is, but it's painfully low drop rates, which he highlights here. Players that are in need of cash to actually utilize it were at risk because, they were constantly trying to make gold to get these, able to use Luminous Ink, and they weren't able to do so very easily. You notice that there's not a meta gear shift which is very important because that might seem mundane. It might seem like it's not a very big piece, but if there's no new meta, why are people golding out their gear? Why are people getting new sets? The only answer would be is if they're new players or they're on a brand new character, but not many people were on brand new characters like we saw with Necrom, which also coincided with a lot of these events. But I think because so many new players made Arcanists, whether they made one or two or even a few of them, because people really liked Magicka ones, Stamina ones, they could fill roles really well as healers, tanks, etc. A lot of people were investing time into this Arcanist class. They were using consumables to level them up. They get training gear. They needed sets once they leveled them out. That's not the same for Scrying, where you just use your existing characters. And he highlights here correctly, it has a stabilizing effect for a lot of people because it kind of no longer required us to constantly be buying things for ourselves. It also means that we're not able to sell things as quickly. So a lot of people were holding on to things that normally they would be selling because they weren't able to do so. I think overall, though, this actually probably had the biggest net negative on the economy because of what could be the ESO economy kind of cycle of life, as I coin it, which is where new players farm easy things like perfect row, raw materials, alchemy ingredients, and then they sell that to mid to end game players. And then those new players, they need to buy sets because they want to partake in events like Mid-Year Mayhem's going to be a big one. They then buy PvP sets, they upgrade those PvP sets, they kind of circle back into the economy. But you can see when one piece of the economic puzzle becomes flooded, it can completely drain all of the money that you would get because now new players can't afford to buy sets, they can't afford to buy consumables, they can't afford to buy certain things, and it's kind of draining the economy, and it's having a kind of an inverse effect where upwards now the people who are kind of in the middle of the economic spectrum who were selling pretty consistently are now also struggling. And then we have the infamous 14-day limit on traders, which he says has twice the cost of listing fees, decreasing profit margins. I don't think that that's inherently true because as somebody who's traded a lot, I would never have, all of my items come back. So you're obviously listing more items, but to me, you should always be listing items with the assumption that they should sell somewhat quickly, unless you're trying to really milk out something that's very valuable, which I think is just an important side note. I also think that he does rightly so say, though, that it became very competitive to race to the bottom, to undercut each other. And I think that the reason for that was not necessarily because of the 14-day change. I think it was the mindset of the 14-day change in that everybody's thought, oh my god, all of these rare items I have aren't going to sell because in 14 days, people aren't going to be searching for them. Therefore, I need to sell guaranteed. Everybody's going to be looking for this items. The problem is that everybody is selling guaranteed, easy to find items that are relatively highly searched for, and it created this big supply of certain items and then a huge demand for other items that is not being met. We'll talk about that kind of later in the video. And then he kind of brings it back to the Zeals of Zenthar Gold Sync. We talked about that a little bit. Everybody was kind of investing in their characters because, it's the fastest way to complete the daily quest when that came around. And then he's got the kind of the conclusionary statements here that we're going to break down. Higher activity of players. But I think a lot of this was returning players. This period was marked by stagnation of the global player economy. Demand is low and stays low. Supply is high and stays high. Transaction volumes go down. Prices fall. It's very likely for the first time the inflation crosses zero and begins to pitch negative. I will only disagree with that because during this time period, I see that guild trader bids continue to get higher. So I think it's a bit hard to know where the ESO GDP is, obviously, but I think certain things are getting more expensive and certain things are getting decreased, and I think that just comes down to everybody is putting their listings into guaranteed easy sales that they know is going to happen because they don't want to pay the double listing fee. You almost have to ignore it, in my opinion, which is what I've been doing, is that I just pretend that it's not 14 days. I just list every item like I want it to sell. Look for those market deficits, and then I try to sell off of those market deficits. And again, we'll talk about that later. But for the most part, I know this because I have friends that play ESO, obviously, and I have all of you to give me feedback. I know a lot of you are doing that, selling very safe items at a low rate because they need gold. And he actually breaks this down very well, and I want to leave this obviously in the video, but please read this because I'm going to kind of go through it very quickly. And that is the macroeconomic emergent behavior through the velocity of money. And he kind of talks about how money transfers from player to player. We've kind of hit upon this a little bit, but the more what money and how it moves from player to player is very important for the long-term success of the game. For example, we talked about this. If a new player gets to level 50, they've been picking up all this goofy stuff off the ground. They're going to sell that to an endgame player because he needs it. That's the perfect economic cycle. Now that endgame player has the items that he needs that he didn't want to have to go farm for because he's got dungeons, trials, whatever to farm. That new player's got gold. He can buy sets for. He can now go out and buy training gear, PvP sets, PvE sets, etc. And then it's a happy transaction. When the market kind of screws over the new player who now has to find gold in new and unique ways, it becomes difficult because he can't sell certain things because he might not be 160. There's certain content that might be blocked to them because they might not have ESO Plus. And so it becomes very tricky then, and it kind of really causes this bottleneck. He highlights very well. I'm going to leave that in. You guys can read this if you want to read more upon that. And I am a bit interested in this point too, where guild trader volumes and total sales of half of where they used to be. I've seen top sales quotas for capital city traders drop from 200K a week to 50K a week overnight. I don't necessarily know if that's true because that hasn't been my experience in what I've been seeing. But I wanted, obviously, I don't play on PC. And then he talks about how real world economies never want inflation to be near zero because it can cause this bottleneck. And then he talks about what can be done, and I want to kind of also interject some of my other points here, and we'll talk about how you as a player can get around inflation as well. But he says it's up to now to ZOS to either allow this, which will continue to crash it, or to stimulate the economy with cash injections and or subsidies. And this is actually way harder than it sounds, because, for example, 100,000 gold on PC is nothing. But 100,000 PC on Xbox is a lot. So you would have to be very cautious about how you stimulate an economy that is affected 6 different mega servers, essentially, all with their own macroeconomic problems, all with different deficits and market stimulations going on. So that's very important to kind of note here. And he says, refrain from gold sinks wherever you can. Player housing with golden vendors, scribing, repairs, etc. I don't necessarily think that that's going to help you a whole lot. I think that players still need to spend their gold how they want to spend it. And again, we'll talk about it at the end of the video. There are some ways you can earn gold, especially on console, that's very effective, that is fully inflation proof. Try to earn quests through in-game sources, quest turn-ins, etc. That's obviously really good. I would encourage people to do that. Buy what you can, when you can, from guild traders. So that would stimulate the economy, which is kind of why I thought that player housing was why that's something you should refrain from, because that's like one of the best gold sinks that players will do. And then refrain from listing assets that hold long-term value and are consumable in nature. Motifs, upgrade materials, ingredients, etc. There will always be a demand for them, which is true. And then later you'll be able to get that value back. The market will eventually bottom out and reach equilibrium, but it's important to remember there's no telling what the bottom is. There's no guarantee prices will recover to last month's or present day value anytime soon. Best we can do is ride this out together. And then he has some edits, which we're also going to talk about before I give kind of some more thoughts on this. I know this is a long video, but you guys wanted an in-depth breakdown, and this is perfect for that. And we're going to have some more stuff at the end too, so just keep on keeping on with me here. He does say here too in his edit that lower prices means in-game gold sources grant more purchasing power, which is true. I think what's interesting here is he doesn't talk about scrying at all, which is, I think, one of the best in-game ways to get money. I mean, yeah, quest completion, but you could just sit in Artaeum and farm tons of gold, fully inflation-proof. But he does also say the flip side is high-cost in-game sinks include player housing, scribing, golden vendor, etc. become less palatable. Interesting, though, to hear that from a PC player, because it's always been significantly worse for console players who are like, The golden vendor literally has 3 times more value to you than it does to us. So it's just kind of a bit funny to hear people talking about that, because on PC, you could buy a ring with your alliance points at the golden vendor, and it could be worth millions. You'll never have that on a console ever again. The benefit, though, to being inflated is shorter times to buy things. Fixed cost things are better, yada yada. We kind of touched upon this. Regarding additional sources of Jubilee boxes, and specifically rare ingredients, materials, Craglorns, dragons, no cooldown activities, which is true. Scribing added a source of heroism as an affix, which puts downward pressure on heroism potions, which was my number one thing to farm, was dragons, because they just give so much gold. They still do, though, because obviously, you're still going to drink those potions. And then he talks about negative feedback loop. But that is that part of this video. There's a whole lot here to break down, and let's keep breaking it down. Let's switch to our in-game. And now we are going to look at the trader purchases inside some Mournhold traders. If you're in any Mournhold trader, any good trader, I always encourage you guys to do this. This value is essential when it comes to knowing what's being traded, sold, what the volume is. It just gives such a good backdrop as to how much listings and sales are going on behind the scenes. So what we have here is a Mournhold trader, and we are seeing what you would expect to see. Heartwood. We have a new housing update coming. Heartwood is an essential component in furnishing, and if you are a new player, getting yourself farming Heartwood and mundane runes is probably going to be the most inflation-proof gold method when it comes to farming as far as those raw materials. That's definitely the best. Oh, you can see here we get tons more sales for even more consumables. What wasn't highlighted in the video too that I want to kind of hit upon now is that we also have a PvP event upcoming. And while some of these sales obviously don't look relevant to that, we now see Columbine sales, which are very essential towards doing all sorts of types of endgame content. We've got tons of style pages. We're going to also talk about why style pages are going to be good in a bit, because I'm going to be doing a whole dedicated video as to how you can kind of cheese really good mid-year mayhem events. Short and sweet of it is that you're guaranteed to get an item from previous mid-year mayhems by spending 2 event tickets, and some of those are worth millions of gold, but you can only get ones you don't have. So you just buy all the cheap ones off the open market, and then you have a higher likelihood to get something that's worth a couple million. Granted, you can't resell it, but you can still have it. You see tons of alchemy sales. We see even more Regulus, which is still pretty good for housing. It's definitely one that's involved there with that. Plague Break. We're seeing sets here sell, so for a pretty good value, an axe 33,000, legs 25,000. You can see, and mind you, this is a way you can convert your alliance points to gold. And I still have my document in the Discord, which breaks down every set that I always encourage you guys to look for. If you see a deficit of a set on there, list it on the market, and it will probably get decent sales. You can see even things as weird as Plague Doctor's bows are selling, Powerful Assault. So people are definitely getting ready for the PvP event in some capacity. Dark Convergence, which is one of the more goofy sets, 77,000 for Dark Convergence. Definitely could be something to consider rolling your alliance points for right now, especially before the event starts, because if you wait until Mid-Year Mayhem starts, you're probably not going to be able to sell it as much. We got Deadly Ring selling for 20,000. You can sell a Deadly Ring, which I think is the most easiest drop you can get for alliance points. Every time I try to get this is what I always try to get when I roll for my deadly items, 194,000 golden dagger. I feel like I just get tons of rings. So that's nice to see too. You can see here the trend of kind of where we're going. We see Mother's Sorrow, which again is an easy set to farm. But you can see too that people are buying what I call mainstream sets. So we notice a trend here of mainstream sets selling. Mother's Sorrow has been mainstream for years. People recommend it. People talk about it. Dark Convergence, Plague Break. You know, we're not seeing sets like Transmutation. Transmutation is a good set. People are not necessarily buying sets like Transmutation right now. It seems like everybody's sticking to the best of the best. And I think part of what we should consider is that people are investing in sets that are highly suggested and tried and true. Now, do I think that Mother Sorrow is the most tried and true set. Not necessarily, but what it does is very straightforward. But what this means is that I think a lot of people are sticking to a specific set. They're not necessarily trying to do a fun setup or goofy setup or, maybe something that's really unique. They're just going straight for this is what works. This is what people are saying online works, and this is what I'm going to go for, and this is what I'm going to do. I think that's what you need to consider for the economy. You can see here that they're selling tons of furnishing items, because I think obviously with the new Q3 update, that's going to be pretty big. And this is what I would encourage you guys to do, because I guarantee you as well, this is going to look different on your console. And what's nice is that this line of thinking that I'm taking you through works if you see any items. If you see a bunch of goofy sets that a lot of people are just kind of like fun, like when I was buying like block sets that deal damage back to people just because I thought it was funny, those are sets that you see sell in a market where people have extra gold and they're just dumping it into fun, unique ways. You can also see here too, what's not being sold. No XP potions. We've not seen a single XP potion sell in 3 hours, and we have double XP right now. That means that new players that would be using their gold to buy XP potions, they're not doing it. All of the assumptions about new players having less gold, or even returning players that might be lower leveled having less gold, is 100% true. That doesn't completely bottleneck the economy. You can still see that there's tons of sales for certain things, but you can see, though, that that group of people probably has significantly less wealth than they normally do. And you can still see, though, that things like Luminous Ink still have a decent market value for how quick you can be getting them, especially if you're a new player. Just on the Gold Road storyline, you're going to come out with a good handful, half dozen of them. You can still sell that to get a good nest egg for yourself. But what are some other ways that you can earn nest eggs for yourself if you wanted to kind of do so? What are the best methods for you that kind of subvert the ESO economy and kind of all the negative aspects of it to just make straight up money? And the number one inflation-proof method for you is scrying. Now, scrying is interesting because you essentially pick a zone, you pick a scry that you wish to do, and then from there, you actually just get an item that you can quick sell for a good chunk of change. For example, this is worth 250 gold. This is worth 1,000 gold. So you get your green lead, then you do your blue lead. And then you've walked out with 1,250 gold that you can sell. And if you've not done your purple lead, you can also sell the purple lead for even more money. If you're looking to have a quick, easy gold method, go through every zone in ESO, do your green, blue, and your purple. The purple makes it instantly worth it. You will walk out, I think, somewhere with about 350,000 gold in-game money. It requires no guild trader, requires no hassle, and no hubble-blub. It is straightforward. And then if you needed an easy zone to repeat, you can easily repeat the green and the blues in places like Artaeum. This, and again, I have a video dedicated to breaking this down, how to do it efficiently, so that way this video doesn't become too long, because we're already talking a whole lot. You can sit in this zone and make about 25 to 30,000 gold. I'd say your average is probably 26 to 28. But imagine 28,000 gold per hour. All you're doing is running around Artaeum, and you're going to be getting extra items as well doing it. Is it going to be worth it, in my opinion? It depends. I would say that it's a perfectly serviceable gold method if you need to get to a point where you can buy a set that allows you to farm other things. But again, if you are scrying, I would suggest, once you have the ability to do purple leads, go to every zone and do all of them. Because then, too, you also unlock the Al-Esh coin, which I will also link in the description below, which just gives you 100,000 gold for free. So at the end of all of this, you could be walking away with about 450,000 gold just by walking around, doing green, blue, and then the purple lead, going to the next zone, green, blue, purple lead, green, blue, purple lead. Then go get the coin, got a video on it, go do that, 100,000 gold, and you'll have more than enough money to get whatever set you need. And the nice thing is because raw materials are so low, you can upgrade that set relatively cheaply. So you can kind of cheese the economy being deflated by utilizing this method right now. Another option for you guys that are base game players that absolutely hate having to go, or you just hate scrying in general, is the Vile Mance, which is inside of Reaper's March. Actually has tons of Imperials inside them. Now, what's really weird about Imperials is this whole floor is filled with them. And if you kill Imperial characters, you actually get straight up gold for doing so. I have a whole video breaking this down as well. But the key takeaway of what you want to do is probably be an Imperial character yourself, because they get extra gold gain, and then kill the Imperials here. Even with doing all that, you're probably at best hoping to get only 20,000 gold per hour. So even with the current deflation in the economy, you're still probably better off doing things like Perfect Row. But as always, Perfect Row is going to be affected by the market crash, as opposed to you just getting straight cash, which is what you'd be doing here. You just by doing this are just going to get gold. Same with scrying, which we talked about. You're just going to be getting the gold, which is nice. And also this week too, I will be doing a thieves breakdown of places to steal from, things to loot. But because a lot of that is going to focus on you getting a chase item, it's not going to be a way that you can really get any more gold per hour than doing any of these methods. And the problem is that selling stolen goods also has a bottleneck, because you can only sell so many per day. So the other good option is obviously doing things like your daily crafting writs to also avoid the market kind of tumbling in on itself. But everyone, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. This is obviously a longer video that breaks down lots of different aspects. Is there things that you want me to break down even further? Probably a lot to cover, but I can always whip up a live stream where we talk about stuff like this more in depth. That way it's more freeform conversational, because this is a lot to talk about. Who knows how long this will even be, because I've been yapping so long to the camera. So we'll see how long this one even is. So if there's more, please let me know. And as always, we're doing our 3 giveaway drawings. All you have to do to enter is leave a comment on the video. Just don't get your comment removed for spam. Second thing is be subscribed. Being subscribed will give you 1 entry into the second drawing, but you can also follow on Twitch and Twitter for an additional 1. And then the third thing is look for a hidden word to be flashed upon the screen. If you're the first person to comment that word, you will win. Thank you guys so much again for watching, and I'll catch you later. Bye, guys.
You better remember to like and subscribe to Jakeclips. Or you should. I might have to pluck your eyes if you don't. Or, better yet, I'll skip rope with your entrails. Do it now. Subscribe. Ta-ta. Off with you.